The state government admits that in Lagos, 80% of the people working are working off the books in the informal economy. So this is hugely important. The problem is that the policies that have been followed are not exactly working with this reality. So that it disturbs me. I'm getting so far ahead of myself. The value of all of this System D around the globe is astounding, because if it were allied in a single country, it would be the second largest economy on earth, rivaling the United States. It would be worth $10 trillion. These are the policies we're getting in Lagos. This is the recent demolition of Badia. This is chopping down part of Ladipo, the auto spare parts market. This is a large demolition in Makoko. And this was, of course, Oshodi in 2007, and this was Oshodi in 2009. And my question is, if we're here to celebrate successes, can we label these things as successes? Because while the traffic may flow better here, and there's a limited amount of go-slows in Oshodi, tens of thousands of people lost their livelihoods. And if we're talking about the economic development of the country, and the economic development of the country reaching down to what are its natural resource, which is the people of the country, then we have to be caring about this kind of level of loss of jobs. Similarly, I was surprised when I came off the plane and drove into the hotel the other night. No more Okada on the main roads. Now again, this may improve air quality, but when I was here in 2008 and I interviewed the Lagos State Governor Commissioner of Commerce, he estimated to me that there were 1 million Okada operators in Lagos. So by banning Okada, we've banned 1 million people and their families from having income. And the question about that is whether the economic effects on them, and whether the economic effects on the entire supply chain that they represented. People who imported the bikes, spare parts dealers at Esponda in the International Trade Fair Market, the women who sold oil and petrol on the side of the road, the gasoline stations that sold oil and petrol to the workers, the people who sold them tea in the mornings. If we don't allow waste pickers in Olusosun, they lose their jobs. And Andrew Saboru, who prided himself up after 16 years as a waste scavenger in the dumps to become a waste dealer, we deprive him of his job. So how can economic development be made more equitable for the people who are the vast majority of the country and are the resource of the country? If you ban street hawking, you prevent hawkers from selling shoes on the street. And their profit margin, just interestingly, is quite high. Lagos shoe merchant estimated to be his profit margin is 42%, which is quite a big multiple of what the Ferragamo group based in Italy makes. And it's not just small-scale businesses, because there are many big businesses that are dependent on the street markets too. Newspapers, a vibrant business in Lagos and all through the country, sell their papers through hawkers at the side of the road, or itinerant hawkers who rove around communities with their little horns selling the newspapers. If you ban street hawking, how do you sell newspapers? A large conglomerate called UAC Foods had a product that was only sold by street hawkers. This is the Gala sausage roll, which everyone must know. And you don't go into Goodies to buy a Gala sausage roll. You buy it in a go-slow when there's a hawker who comes to you, because that's where the product is most in demand and most effective, or at the Obalende bus stop. By banning street hawkers, this is a product that impacts a multinational firm traded on the Nigerian stock exchange, UAC Foods. And it'll be interesting to see if they report any change in their bottom line next year from the loss of this sales channel. With apologies to My brothers at Nokia and at Etisalat, who were so kind to be here and sponsor this conference, they are not the reasons why mobile telephony has boomed in Nigeria. The reasons are the street economy. It was kiosks and hawkers where you could buy your recharge cards, which is how all these mobile phone companies make their money, is by selling airtime. And it was the innovative merchants from Computer Village and other places around Lagos who traveled to China to bring in low-cost phones that enabled everyone to be able to afford a mobile phone and sometimes have 2 or 3 mobile phones with different chips in them for different services. And in this case, I was in Guangzhou, China, and this was the Guangzhou Dachatou second-hand trade center, where I met a friend named Chief Arthur Okafor, who was buying $40,000 worth of mobile phones and bringing them back to Lagos to sell. And indeed here, this one went to Eddie, but here you can see the packages in Guangzhou. There's a mobile number on them, and Lagos, Nigeria. So my argument to the policymakers throughout Africa, but mostly in Nigeria, is that when the mass of people are earning their money, admittedly, through this parallel channel, it's incumbent on government to find ways of working with the parallel channel, which doesn't mean wiping it out, but it also doesn't mean allowing it purely to just exist. So I would argue there was a precedent that had been set before the ban on okadas of starting to regulate the industry, which was with helmets and with the rule against multiple passengers on one bike for safety. And that was largely obeyed. And I think that was a model for how government could have approached the industry, to begin in primitive ways over time to regulate the industry for more safety, while at the same time allowing people to make their money and an important transportation alternative for people, and really it was the transportation necessity for many people, to exist. This is exactly where all discussions should be focused. Yes, education is important, but that's something that improves people over time. We have to do it, and it's very important to find the right ways of investing in it, and for government to play a positive role in it. Yes, agriculture is important. All those sectors are important. But if this is where the majority of people are making their money, pragmatically speaking, this is where we have to look at where the opportunities are, because this is where the jobs are.
I don't understand why government does not see it as an important part. I mean, I suppose that it has to do with the fact that they often don't pay taxes, and that they do business in a kind of underground way, like avoiding the delays at Apapa or Tin Can Island and bringing their goods in through Cotonou, which is, you can get your goods cleared from the port in 24 hours. So all of this gives them a bad reputation. But on the other hand, people buy from them because the goods are cheaper and still of reasonable quality. I think that even on pirated mobile phones, it was pirated mobile phones that were brought into the country, and that was a significant and important development for people to be able to afford mobile phones. So that's why mobile phones spread throughout the country, because they were cheap and plentiful and worked. So I think piracy is a canard. What I think government can do is try to work with markets like Alaba to bring infrastructure improvements that the markets themselves cannot afford to do. Tarring roads, perhaps providing better or more stable electrical power, making sure that lorries or containers full of goods can get in and out with relative ease. You could provide, just like they did for the BRT, you could provide a separate lane for Okada and say Okada are only allowed to ride on the right, not in the center, and that would control where the Okada could go. Or you could require Okada drivers to get a driver's license and register their bikes. And then when they get into an accident, they can be traced and their license can be revoked and they can be prevented from being an Okada driver in the future. Or you can enforce a speed limit. Or you could actually, some of this is the government's problems because the roads are potholed, the roads are covered with gravel, and so sometimes it's going over a bump or going through a pothole that causes the accident. So all of this can be dealt with through government working with the Okada drivers, and they were represented by an Okada union, so it's not hard to reach these people, rather than putting 1 million Okada drivers out of work. No, I do believe, look, it's 80% of the people and 80% of the economic activity in Nigeria happens through the informal sector. So this is huge. And so if we talk about energizing the people, if we talk about development issues, they have to be talked about in the context of informality and the informal economy. If not, we're only talking about the top 2% of corporations. We're talking about UAC Foods, and we're talking about Total, and we're talking about Dangote, and we're not talking about where the real people make their money. And so if we want true development, then I would love to see there be advocacy groups that could actually advocate for the informal economy.